Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John, and this behind me is my tractor. I've had a lot of requests over the years to go through my tractor and kind of tell people about it. And we're finally going to do that in this video. Got several things. Now, I bought this tractor in 2008, so it's 15 years old. I've had very few problems with it, but I have had a couple of problems, and I'm going to tell you what all those are. I'm actually having a couple problems with it right now. We're going to fix those. We're also going to do the annual maintenance that I typically do on it. And I want to go through what my thought process was in buying a Mahindra, why I chose this tractor, and what my overall thoughts on it are after 15 years. Now, this is not a sponsored video. I paid for this with my own money, and you know, I'm going to give you an honest opinion. So let's get into it. So this is a Mahindra 7520 four-wheel drive. It's a 75 horsepower diesel, and I got it with the loader, forks, a bucket, a 6-foot bush hog, and also a backhoe. This I bought later, this bush hog that I use a lot, but the 6-foot bush hog I've actually since sold. One of the problems I'm having right now is this tire. You can see it's been all chewed up, and right here it is split, and that thing is just a hair's breadth away from starting to leak. I've got a good tire place in the area. They tell me that that's not really fixable. While I think it's possible somebody could fix it, a new tire is 750 bucks. And given all the other damage that's on this thing, I just need to get a new tire. So I've got one of those on order. Not real happy about it, but that's actually essentially my fault. Turns out that the reason that happens is because when you turn really tight, the tire can actually hit this. And this is the place that the jack mounts for this bush hog. So basically, once you're doing a hard left turn, this tire will come over here and start chewing on that, and it tears the tire up, and it actually pulling on this caused that to rip. Thankfully, the other side, although it has contacted it a couple of times, it has barely contacted it, and that one is still in pretty good shape. So we're going to leave that one alone and just get a new one over here. So what I need to do is cut these off, both sides. I only need one, and I think I'm going to put it here. That's the jack point. The jack goes right here when you're using the bush hog, so that you can lift it up and then disconnect it from the tractor. The other problem I'm having with it right now is it is beeping. And there are two beepers on this thing. One of them is a maintenance service reminder that you can just reset and shut it off. And that's not a big deal. And that's not the beeping that I'm getting. I'm getting like a warning beeper, but it doesn't really give me any codes or information as to what the cause is. I've done some research online, and I'm 99% sure, because it's an intermittent beep. It only happens sometimes. It doesn't happen immediately when you start using the tractor. I'm pretty sure what I'm getting is borderline transmission oil pressure. And the transmission oil sending unit, the pressure sensor, is right here. And sometimes those need to be replaced. The other possibility is that I just need to change my transmission oil filter. So that's what I'm going to do first and see if that beeping goes away. If it doesn't, then I'm going to have to dig further and really try to figure out what's going on here. So speaking of oil pressure sending units, this is the engine oil pressure sending unit. And when I first got the tractor, I had a defective one, and it went bad in like 20 hours of use, and it was giving me low engine oil pressure. It had good oil pressure, but I talked to the dealer. They sent me a new one. I unscrewed it, put that in, plugged it in. I haven't had a problem since. That's one of the issues I had with it. The other issue I had was a little harder to figure out. At one point it didn't want to run. It wouldn't stay running, and I determined that it was starving for fuel. And I went through a lot of things. I thought maybe, here, let me show you here. I thought maybe my injection pump was bad. This is a Bosch injection pump. Of course, it's timed, and they are fairly expensive. If you go to a diesel injection service company, they can often rebuild and fix these. And I thought I was having issues with that, and I troubleshot this thing for a long time trying to figure it out. And eventually I did figure it out, but surprisingly, it was a very simple problem. Right here this hose had collapsed. And this is the output from the fuel tank over to the filters and pump and everything. And basically I had an obstruction in the hose right there. So I just had to replace that. I don't recall, I may have, like maybe a stick came in and hit it and kinked it or something. I don't recall what caused that. But yeah, I mean, that was probably the biggest problem I've had with it. And it was not an expensive problem. It was just difficult for me to figure out. The only other problem I've had to my memory is just after the warranty ran out, this has an intake preheater on it, and there's a relay that controls that. So when you turn the key on, that coil light means that the preheater is on. So it is not preheating right now, and it should be. The relay should make it automatically preheat for like 30 seconds, and then it'll shut off. It's really only something I need in the cold winter months, and it was under warranty, and if I recall, that relay was going to be like $300, and I just didn't want to spend the money. So rather than use a relay, I just went to the auto parts store, got one of these start switches, and just wired it in place of the relay. So now it's manual. So all I have to do is pop the hood. If I hold this button, that light comes on. So I just manually control the preheater and preheat it as needed. In really cold weather, I did have some trouble getting it to start at times, so I added a block heater, and that was very easy. There was just a plug there. If I recall, the block heater was like 30 bucks. This is basically just a resistive heater that ends up heating the coolant, and it just comes up here to a plug. So basically you just plug it in. While it's plugged in, that's heating. You let it sit there for an hour or so and then start it. It'll start right up, even on a really, really cold day. Oh, I forgot about one more problem. My key switch went bad, and it was not sending power to this, which is the fuel shutoff solenoid, and it wouldn't run because unless that's powered, it won't allow fuel to flow. So I had to get a new key switch in it. Again, pretty cheap, but it did take me some troubleshooting to figure it out. If you've watched my previous videos, you know I had some problems with the hydraulic cylinders on the backhoe. We'll talk more about this, but really I think these cylinders failing was my fault. Everything else on this tractor in 15 years and 1,300 hours of use has been flawless. Now, I don't know about you, in my book, 15 years of owning equipment, even good quality equipment, you're gonna have some problems. And I feel like these problems have all been fairly minimal, knock on wood. I think this thing is a pretty well-built tractor. So why did I get a Mahindra? Well, I mean, what it really comes down to, it was the best deal. You know, I do like trying to buy American-made stuff, and the first tractor I ever bought was a John Deere. It was a smaller tractor. It was 40 horsepower, and that was many years ago. But I can tell you, I wasn't that impressed with it. The build quality was not that good. Even when, I mean, I bought it brand new, and even after, you know, a month of using it, the loader would sag down to the ground like very rapidly, way faster than it should have. I went back to the dealer and they said it was within spec. And most of that tractor was essentially bent sheet metal. They were throwing them together. Now, that was a compact tractor. I'm not bashing John Deere. I know they make some good stuff. I think some of their bigger real agricultural tractors are built to a better standard. But I tried John Deere, and I priced John Deere when I was going to get this one. That's when I moved to this farm. I needed a bigger tractor, and I wanted something that I was going to be able to do some logging with. I needed lift capacity. And so I looked at all your major players. I looked at John Deere and Massey Ferguson and Case IH and Mahindra and Kubota. And what I found was, by far, Mahindra was the heaviest built and heaviest overall tractor with the highest lift capacity for far less money. And just to give you an idea, I still remember the John Deere price. So I wanted the tractor with a loader, forks and a bucket, a backhoe, a 6-foot bush hog. Yeah, and that's it. The John Deere version weighed about 9,500 pounds with the backhoe on it. And it could lift, if I recall, I think 3,500. And when they measure that, they measure it at the pivot pins, which I believe is right here. I don't know if it would be here or here, but either way, when they're doing the maximum lift capacity, they're measuring it close to the tractor. The further out you get, the less you're going to be able to lift. This tractor is built much heavier. I mean, this thing isn't bent up sheet metal. That's a piece of flame cut 1-inch plate. You know, this stuff is, I think that's 3/8. And you can see that big old bushing in there. That looks like 3/4. Big pins. This thing is also 3/8. Everything's built really heavy. I mean, I have used this thing hard. I have lifted the maximum that this thing can lift. It doesn't flex, it's stiff. And this tractor weighs just over 12,000 pounds with the backhoe on it. Here's the mounts for the backhoe. Here we've got 3/4 inch plate. Tractors and weight, weight is very important. That's your stability. If you're doing a lot of lifting, you need the tractor to be heavy. When you're wanting good traction, when you have a lot of weight on the front end loader, you want that tractor to be heavy. So the weight of the tractor is very important. So this tractor, weighing just over 12,000 pounds, can lift, if I recall, I think it was 4,300. It's a little over 4,000 at the pivot pins. It could also lift a little bit higher. But here's the kicker. All right, what was the price difference here? You know, what is it worth it to save a few $1,000s to buy a Mahindra rather than a John Deere? Well, the John Deere was $55,000 for all that setup. Again, loader, forks, bucket, backhoe, bush hog, $55,000. How much do you think this one was? It was $38,500 delivered. Yeah, we're talking about $17,500 to get a heavier tractor that can lift more, but it's a Mahindra instead of a John Deere. That's an awful lot to pay for a name in my view. I gotta say, after 15 years, this tractor has been, for me at least, it has functioned better. It has had fewer problems. You know, it doesn't sag. It's lifted just about anything that I've thrown at it. The only thing it can't lift is that if I get like a 35-inch oak log that's 16 feet long, but that's an absurd amount of weight for any tractor to lift. In that case, I can lift one end of it and drag it. So, you know, this thing, for the money, I couldn't beat it. I mean, $38,000 for that setup with the backhoe. I'm not showing you the backhoe on there now, but I've got it in plenty of my previous videos. I'll show a clip of the backhoe on there. So one thing about Mahindra that a lot of people don't know, it's not Chinese. They're made in India. India has, you know, real factories and real production. And Mahindra, how do you think Mahindra stands up to the worldwide agricultural market? Where do you think it fits in with like John Deere and Massey Ferguson and all the big tractor manufacturers? You might be surprised to find out that Mahindra is the largest manufacturer of tractors in the world. They are not the largest in the US, but worldwide, Mahindra is king. And they do know how to make a tractor. They make a good tractor. This isn't a Chinese knockoff piece of junk. Mahindra is its own thing, and I've been impressed with it. A buddy of mine also has a Mahindra, the guy I recently built a pond for, and he's been happy with his, and I've recommended it to some other people too. Again, not a sponsored video. I have no reason to lie to you. I think for the money, I'd have to reprice them now and see how they stack up to the other manufacturers, but when I bought it, this was a no-brainer. So let's get to work on this thing. The first thing I want to do is see if I can get this beeping issue sorted out, hopefully by just changing the transmission oil filter. So let's do that first. That's one nice feature. The battery will swing out of the way, give you access to the filters. So I'm gonna go run the tractor for a little bit and see if that thing continues to beep. And if it does, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Before I do on the bush hog, I've got this thing that tends to work loose because it hits things, and most of the bolts have come out. There's supposed to be 4 bolts in it. There's only 2 right now. I need to replace this bolt, but I don't have the right length bolt. So I like to keep all thread on hand just for something like this. This is some 1/2-inch all thread, and I can just cut off the length that I need and put a couple nuts on it, and then you can either weld one side and then nut the other, or just use Loctite on both sides, which is what I'm going to do. So we're still beeping, obviously. I think what I want to do is actually measure the oil pressure at that sending unit and confirm that it's good, that it's bad. I mean, if the pressure's low, I've got a real problem. If the pressure's fine, then I change the sending unit. Although I probably need to do some electrical testing on it just to make sure that it is the sending unit. Yeah, let me see what I can come up with here. All right, so kind of interesting. There is the potential problem, but I got that from an online forum, and I'm not sure that they're necessarily right. I unplugged it, and I hooked an ohm meter to it, and it was very low ohms, so it's like it's a closed switch. It was like 4 ohms, so almost closed when there's no pressure. And I soon discovered that when it's not plugged in, the machine will not start. The starter doesn't do anything. So I had to like back probe it to have it plugged in and start it. And when I started it, the ohms did go up. So it is at least functioning, but I don't know if that's the problem. So I called a dealer, and he thinks it's my maintenance reminder beeper. He said, unless one of your warning lights comes on the dash, which no lights are on, then it's the maintenance reminder. And that's just sort of like an auxiliary system to try to remind you to change your oil and stuff. And I don't need it.
There's a procedure to reset the maintenance reminder beeper, and I've done that many times, and it never has any effect.
I told him that, and he said, you ought to just unplug it. It's not a problem. You know, the tractor's functioning fine. There's no warning lights on the dash. If I had low oil pressure, it would tell me. So I might do a little more research and confirm that the information he's given me is good. The guy seemed to know what he was talking about. And in that case, I'm going to get out a mechanic stethoscope. When it starts beeping, I'm going to locate the beeper and unplug it. That might be the solution for me. Because I don't need a maintenance reminder buzzer. I'll do my maintenance when it needs done. All right, guys, I've been telling you wrong. This is the sensor I've been looking at right there. This is kind of odd here, this box right here that's coming out of the transmission going straight up to the gear shift. That is a safety interlock switch so that it won't start if it's in gear. That's all that is. And it probably depended on what gear I had it in, what the ohms reading was. Not sure, but that is not the sensor that I'm after. Looking under here further, but it's right there. I hope you can see that. I can't even see the camera. But I do think I can get a wrench on that. I can touch it, and it's kind of a straight shot. So let me unplug it here. Yeah, this one's just a 1-wire. The cool thing is the entire transmission, reservoir, and everything is beneath it. So I'm pretty sure that I can take that sensor out and not leak all my oil out. You can see it right there. I've got a socket on a wobble extension, which hopefully will angle enough. Look at that. That's beautiful. No oil dripping out yet, and it's pretty darn loose. In fact, it might be out. It is out. Sweet. Yeah, so this was supposed to stay in the tractor. This is the sensor. And I think what happened is, because this was hand loose, I think it did break loose, because it was like that, but then it caught this, the socket did, and unscrewed the whole thing. Kind of tricky because you can't see what's going on when you're way up inside there. So I'll put that back in. This looks like an 1/8. Yeah, that's an 1/8 NPT. So I can hook a test hose to that, like this. And then gauge. This is a 1/4 NPT, and I think this is a metric. I don't think this is a 1/4. Either way, these things don't screw together very far. That said, this thing is only supposed to be running at like 20 psi, and I don't care if it leaks a little bit. I just want to verify the pressure. It should be at least 20. If it's more, that's okay, unless it's like crazy high. I don't think that'll be the case. Yeah, let me get this put back together on the tractor, and then we'll have a test gauge. Got it. Let me start this thing up and make sure it's not going to spray everywhere. Let's see what the gauge shows. Over 20. That's at a low idle. So I have good pressure at my transmission oil lube circuit. Yeah, well over the 20 cutoff, so I don't think I need to worry about that anymore. And I think the Mahindra guy may have been right. It's just the maintenance reminder, and I'm going to unplug the buzzer. Maintenance reminder is kind of a nice idea, but when it does stuff like this, they need to give you a readout. You know, if it's beeping, tell me why it's beeping. Tell me it's a maintenance reminder, but it just kind of leaves you guessing. That's pretty annoying. Before I close this battery up, I'm going to go ahead and change out the hydraulic oil filter. All right, and it actually has 1,200 hours on it. All right, I gotta take this, I'm just gonna take the whole tire and wheel off. I'll just take that in my truck to the tire shop and have them change it out. It's actually not that hard to change this out, but when you buy the tire from them, they do it for free, and they've got the right tools for it. You do it just with hand tools, you don't need a machine, but there's no point in me doing it. I either have to move the tire or I move the tire and the wheel. Might as well just move both. Seriously, dude? That does not seem like the best place to build a nest. Just saying. See, the frame of this tractor is welded up 1-inch plate and some 3/4 inch on brackets and stuff. Heavy built. You can see the whole thing's bulging out because of it. So basically those are the inner layers there. Once that punctures, which it's just a matter of time until a stick jams through it, that tire is done. Here's that tire, and there's the split closed up now that it doesn't have air in it. But this tire had actually been patched. There's the other side of that split. And actually the only thing that was holding was the patch. That's what we were seeing from the outside. So it's actually pretty impressive that that held as long as it did. All right, let's go ahead and do the engine oil. There's the engine filter. It's towards the front of the machine, so it's got a cage on it that's rather heavy duty to protect it from getting hit by anything. There's the filter. The oil drain plug is up behind there. A little bit inaccessible, but not bad. Love it. So this is one complaint I have about this. The oil just goes in way too slow. So right here are the fuel filters. There's a primary and a secondary. And let's go ahead and change those out. There's some crud in the bottom of that. We'll clean that out. Oh yeah. Yeah, need a little work in there. Be right back. Yeah, it looks a little better. Come with a new O-ring. Now this one is clearly the primary filter. The old ones that I got from Napa, and we just put the same filter in. But these are from Mahindra, and they have a primary and a secondary, so yeah, that's fine. We'll do it. So this thing will sit here and dribble, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It dribbles with the filters off, but it also means that it will gravity bleed and make the whole bleeding thing a lot easier. I just hit my head like 4 times in about 10 seconds.
No, on camera.
What are you doing?
Don't believe a word he says. What are you doing?
Almost done. At least with this part. Click. Alright, I got a primer pump here, so I need to crack this banjo bolt, give the air away out, and prime it to that point, and usually that's all you need to do on this machine. It's not too bad. Yep, there it is. Alright, so that concludes the maintenance. Now, I'm not going to unplug that buzzer yet. I'm actually curious to see. Maybe it was sensing something. Maybe it was sensing like a high negative pressure on the oil pickup in the engine. Now we've changed the hydraulic filter, the engine oil filter, and also the fuel filters. Could it maybe have some kind of sensor in there? I wish it explained the system better. You know, I've looked through the service manual. I don't see any explanation of this whole buzzer thing. And it may very well be that it's just timer and hours and it's just not working right and it needs to be disconnected. But it's also possible that it knew it was time. So I'm going to run it like it is and we'll see if it comes back. But before I run this thing, I do not want to risk this brand new tire that ended up costing more than $850. It was $865 or something. Good grief. I do not want to run this with that there and potentially damage it again. So we're going to fix this before we put this thing to the test. Now that thing's been sitting up in the air like that for a couple hours. I can tell you my John Deere, it would have lasted maybe 20 minutes. It had been on the ground with the curl swung all the way down. Yeah, but that was within spec according to the dealer. Now, you know, I think I probably just got either a bad control or... My real disappointment is not that it had that. It's the fact that the dealer was okay with that. I had bought this thing brand new from them and they were like, yeah, it's within spec. You're fine. The repair guy knew. Like, he looked at me and he's like, sorry, man, it's within our specs. You know, he was kind of a little sheepish about it. Because that's BS. A new tractor, that shouldn't happen. So there you can see what that's for. Problem is, obviously it contacts the tire. I think it'll work just fine if I take that off of there and put it right there. I don't see why it wouldn't. And the other side, I'm just gonna take it off. Let's get her done. call your attention to this too. This is a nice thing to have. It was kind of pricey, but I had to do it. You fill it with water, you pump it up with compressed air, just with your regular air compressor. It goes to like 120 psi or something. And you can pretty safely work on stuff and have an extinguisher that's not going to cover it in corrosive powder if you need to use it, and you can recharge it for free. Oh yeah, that's picking it up. I'm happy with that. I don't think that's going to be tearing up any tires, and will still function as a jack. So let's run this thing and see if it's going to beep at me. I do need to reset this this timer. So all I'm going to do for that, pop the hood, open this up, take one of the spare fuses, and let's turn the ignition on. Wait 10 seconds and short the leads. There. All right, that is supposedly what you do to reset it. All right, I located it. It's that right there. Unplugged it, and the beeping blessedly stopped. I'm gonna go look through the service manual. I just want to verify what that beeper is, if I can. All right, so looking at the wiring diagram, this is the one I disconnected. This one is labeled the IPTO hooter. This on the instrument cluster is the main alarm. And that one, of course, is still connected. That is the one that goes to coolant temp sensor, the oil pressure sensor, the engine oil pressure sensor, all the critical things on the tractor. So yeah, I'm not sure why they labeled this IPTO hooter, but I'm pretty sure that's the only other one I can find. This has got to be the maintenance reminder. But I am comfortable operating this thing. I'm going to get my bush hogging done. How can you make bush hogging a field interesting? Well, there's something I've always wanted to see. I think it would be cool if you could do it from a drone, but a drone won't stay up long enough to do the whole field. But what I can do is put a camera right there on a boom lift and film the whole field being mowed and then play it back for you really fast. Let's check it out. All right, that is 80 feet up. The base of the platform is 80 feet up. The camera's at like 85. Let's get that field mowed.
These fields are grazed by my cattle, and they eat what they like and leave what they don't, so you have to mow down what remains after they're done. Here you can see with some of the tight turns how close the tire gets to the frame of the bush hog. But I'm happy to say, even after bush hogging several fields since I did this repair, I still have never contacted that rail. And if I were, it wouldn't do damage to the tire like that thing sticking out was.
So this is one of the biggest hazards on a tractor. They make guards to help protect you, but they always end up getting torn up. Just stay the heck away from that rotating stuff. There was a guy in my county that died several years back using a post-hole digger that was rotating. It caught his sleeve and wrapped him up. And you also have to think about things like baling twine or baling wire laying on the ground. Because if it gets wrapped up, it's going to be then dragging across the ground. It catches your foot, it pulls you in. So that rotating stuff there is one of the biggest hazards of tractors. Be careful. Give it plenty of respect. One of the best things you can do for your bush hog is keep the deck clean. If you're not going to use it for a couple of months or a long length of time, get all this grass off of here because it just holds moisture against the deck, gets through the paint, rusts it out. And that's what usually ends up ruining them, because otherwise, if you still got good steel there, you can always repair it. You can always put a new gearbox, you can always put new blades. Rusting your deck out, you're going to need a new bush hog. A leaf blower makes quick work of it. And a leaf blower that actually works makes quick work of it. So there's 4 ways you're going to hook things to your tractor. The most common is the 3-point hitch. We'll look at that in a minute. This is just the drawbar. Basically, I am towing this thing and I'm hooked to the PTO. The PTO is just a spline shaft there that rotates and drives your implements. So most of your cutters, bush hogs, chippers, rotary type things are going to run off of that PTO. You can do direct to frame, which is how my backhoe goes on. It hooks on here and here on both sides. And then of course you've got the front end loader and whatever attachments you want there. You can get remote valves, hydraulic valves, or just extend hoses up to the front so that you can control stuff up here as well. Most tractors, this one included, attach the same way a skid steer does. This bush hog is way too big for a 3-point hitch because the 3-point hitch actually lifts the entire implement off the ground, and this would weigh too much for that. And it has kind of an interesting mechanism. That cylinder right there is the lift cylinder, so it can lift itself up. When this cylinder actuates, it pivots this entire thing, which then pivots the wheels down and lifts this up. And of course these are tied together, so this also pivots down and the whole thing will come up. On the back, well, how does it come up on the front? Well, when this comes down, it creates tension in this rod here, and that goes to the front. There's 2 of them. That goes to the front and pulls on this, which then pivots here, and it rotates down, thereby lifting the bush hog up. It's kind of a cool mechanism. I'll show you. So the other thing with this is a bat wing bush hog, meaning it has 2 wings that fold down. Great for transport if you want to put it on a trailer and tow it down the road. So how do we actuate these hydraulic cylinders? Well, with the remote hydraulic valves, or remote control valves they call it. Typically tractors have 2. You have options, you can get 3 or 4 or probably more, probably as many as you can fit here. But I've got 2 sets here, they come in pairs. One of these is the up-down, and the other one is the bat wing. All right, here we are up at the hay barn. Let's get this thing disconnected. Right, we are free. That's the only attachment I have that uses the drawbar, and the drawbar gets in the way of the other things, so I'm taking this off. Basically what we have there is a pin, and then this threads, so that goes into a hole, support on both sides, and then this threads underneath it and holds it in place. And those just go through that hole there. Those are the 3 links for the 3-point link. There's 2 on the side, 1 on the top. Let's get those put on. I actually don't need to use it, but that chipper hooks to a 3-point hitch, and I could probably just move it with the loader, but I need to move it. It's in the way. I got to put hay there, and I want to show you guys this hitch, so let's do it. So I found this to be the easiest way. If you care, these things get pretty heavy, so the first thing I want to do is get the lifters attached so it can help carry the weight. And you put it against your hip, you can adjust the height like that. Goes in pretty easy. Then you want to get the outer link. So going through every little detail is kind of beyond the scope of one video, but that's what I just did. Put a pin through there. Now I'm going to slot this into that. And pretty easy to do because it's hanging. And then this goes on that pin. Drop your pin in, and that link is on. Now, one nice feature this has, a lot of tractors have this, but my John Deere did not, is this is locked, and that's how it's going to be when you're using it. But when you're hooking things up, it's hard to get that perfectly lined up. So this allows you to lift it up, and then it'll slide. You don't want it to slide all the way out, but it can slide out and allow you to get it on. And then once you have everything hooked up, you just back into it, and it automatically locks in place. So that's really handy. Both sides do it. Yeah. So there's a pin right there that prevents it from coming all the way out. And apparently I've lost this one, so I just need to replace that pin. Yeah, it would have caught it right there. Thanks for pointing that out. You can see I've picked the whole thing up. Obviously it lifts up here, and then that's under tension, and the whole thing's kind of cantilevered off the back of the tractor. So that's the same way you're going to pick up like a box blade or a bush hog, and all sorts of attachments. And that lift is very strong. I've used this for skidding really heavy logs. You chain the end of the log, attach it to your 3-point hitch, pick it up. It gives you more traction because it's driving your tires, your drive tires into the ground, and you can skid quite a log with that. So now we're going to put this backhoe on. This thing leaks, but it makes an excellent counterweight. I have a bunch of heavy stuff to lift, And this really makes the tractor stable because it's got a lot of weight right on the back of the tractor and mounts directly to the frame, so there's no wobbling around or slop or anything. Now let me say something about the attachments on this tractor. So I have already rebuilt this cylinder and one of the outriggers, the stabilizer cylinders. This one is leaking quite bad, and this whole thing needs attention. It's also leaking in the controls. And when that first happened, I called the Mahindra dealer, ended up getting someone on the phone who told me that they don't have parts available and that I should just buy a new cylinder. I made the idiot mistake of trusting the person on the phone to know what they were talking about. They did not, and I should have just looked a little bit closer at this attachment. This thing is made in Iowa by Bradco, an American company. And there's the model number, there's the serial number, and if you call them, you can get the parts you need. This is a USA-made attachment. Now, why is it having problems? Well, because it usually sits like this, and that's terrible for hydraulics. To sit here for months, maybe even more than a year, not be cycled at all, the seals get hard, they dry out, they crack, and they start to leak. So, yeah, anyone that knows anything about hydraulics will tell you you need to cycle them fairly regularly to get the most life out of them. Now, this thing worked flawlessly for about, I'd say 14 years before I started having trouble with it. And given how little I've used it, like how infrequently I've used it, I think it's done quite well. And I would not fault Mahindra or Bradco, the company, the USA company that actually made it. So just like the backhoe, the loader is another attachment, another option. And it's got its own cylinders. Now, this one has done flawlessly, no leaks, no problems. Well, every time you get on the tractor, you lift the loader. And there's only two functions. There's your curl and there's your lift. And you use them every single time and it's working great. So they have been treated much better by me. And that is made in Kansas by Kansas Machine Works. And there's the model number, and I'm sure you can call them and get parts. So that whole thing about not being able to get seal kits, that was an idiot on the phone who didn't know what they were talking about, passing that on to me, and me, the idiot, trusting them to know what they were talking about. Yeah, attachments are made in the USA, and they're good quality. Doing what I do with that backhoe is not fair to that backhoe. That high enough to fit down on that hook. So now I can back underneath it and set that down. What do you guys think? You like that tractor? They do like the tractor. In fact, they get conditioned when they see the tractor to think they might be getting a bale of hay, but that only happens in the winter. Why would you need hay right now? Look at this field you're on. Go eat. It's almost like they're listening to me. So let me give you a few other quick tips. I talked about my tractor shade structure and a battery charger in my farm and garden hacks. You can watch that here, somewhere. Some other tips. Tractors are not idiot proof. So many things around us have been designed so that you would really have to be a fool to hurt yourself with. It is very easy to hurt yourself with a tractor, so do not take it lightly. Be careful. For instance, you can put like a log, say, the round part like this, the log going that way, in those forks. And if you lift it all the way up
and have it at full curl, meaning the forks are all the way up, it's going to dump it right on you. You could dump a log directly onto yourself, and that's exactly where it's going to go, right into your lap. I mean, that would kill you really easily. Not only that, if you put an implement on the front, like say these forks, these things probably weigh 350 pounds or something, and you forget to lock these in place, or they don't actually lock, like this thing is canted out because something jammed in the way and you put those handles down but it didn't actually get it, you pick it up, you can dump the forks right into your lap. That'd be a fun day. One thing that scared the heck out of me one day, I'm always very paranoid whenever I put something on the front or anything on this tractor. I make sure it's attached properly, and it was attached properly, and I was out in the woods, I was skidding logs, and at one point I needed to pull a log to me, but I couldn't go backwards. So I was using the loader to do it. I was lifting all the way up, and then I would go down and shorten my chain and then go all the way up. And at one point I went all the way up and I noticed one of these handles was up. Now, what had to have happened, because I know I had put it down, was a stick or something in the woods when I went down pushed it up. So I only had one side locked, and I noticed it right as I was getting to the very top of the lift. And of course it didn't drop it on me because one side was still locked, but that's just not a good feeling. That would be a really bad day. You gotta be vigilant, you gotta be careful. When you're pulling things, chains or pull straps are safest. Now, I like a chain, because when a chain breaks, it doesn't do much. It's gonna bend a little bit as it snaps, take most of the energy out. It doesn't have a lot of stretch to it, so it just kind of breaks. But you still don't want to get hit by a chain, but it's not gonna go flying like mad. A cable will launch. So if you're pulling with a cable, you better make sure that cable's not gonna break, and also that you have something to protect you. Even if it's not coming directly at you, I would not pull a log with a cable on this if I had any doubt about that cable breaking, because the cable can potentially launch up and then smack you, and you're gonna have a bad day. Pull straps, a lot of people like pull straps. I think if you're just using a pull strap, that's fine. But if there's something else attached to your strap, like, I don't know, say a metal ring, a quick link or something like that, that strap can stretch, and then whatever's attached to it when it breaks can launch and smack you. So I prefer a chain. The other thing is, if you're lifting near the tractor's capacity, make sure you're on flat ground. Jennifer almost had a bad day. She was on a slight angle, but she was lifting something that was right at the limit. It was about 2,500 pounds in a pallet, so it was all the way out here. This can lift more weight than that closer in, but once you get out in the pallet, that's about the limit. And it was at a slight tilt. It didn't seem like much, but once she got it up, the tractor went forward and it started to go sideways, and she ended up dumping it on the ground, and everything was okay, thank goodness. One thing that I've heard that I find interesting: farming's very dangerous. The most likely person to be injured on a farm is the farmer's spouse. And that's because they have access to all this equipment that they're not quite as familiar with. They maybe don't know all the ins and outs, and they end up using it and they get hurt. So you guys be careful, and make sure your wives are careful, or your husbands. Most tractors, if you want, you can get a wider footprint. You can take that wheel off and you can flip it around, and that will bring the tire out. And oftentimes you have several options. You can change it here and you can change it here to give you different widths, and that will make you more stable, but it also makes you wider, so going through gates and stuff becomes more difficult. Just a couple more quick tips. Put a fire extinguisher on it. They don't cost that much. Metal valve, I think this thing was $40 on Amazon. Put an earplug in it so that a mud dauber doesn't get in there and clog up your extinguisher. Toolbox. This is just a DeWalt toolbox that I bought on Amazon. Said it was waterproof, and it's done very well. I drilled some holes in the bottom in case it ever did get water, it would be able to drain out. And I also just used some sheet metal screws and screwed it down. And that thing's wonderful. I've never had water get in there, and it's so nice to have a ready access place to put your tools. One other tip: if you're going to be doing a lot of lifting, you need a four-wheel drive tractor. That might not be intuitive at first, but when you really load that front end down,
you put all the weight on the front wheels and very little weight on the back wheels, depending on what your rear counterweight is. I have definitely had it to the point where I didn't have it in four-wheel drive, and I had so much weight on the front that I couldn't move the tractor, even on flat ground with good traction, because those things are just barely touching and the rear wheels are just spinning. So you have to be able to put it into four-wheel drive to be able to move if you have enough weight on the front. A lot of people like to get their tires loaded. That means filling these with liquid that is not particularly cheap, because it's got to be something that won't rust your rim out. And that adds additional weight and stability to the tractor. I wouldn't recommend doing that, because at some point your tire is going to leak. As we just saw with my other tire, I had to get it replaced. All your fluid's going to leak out, and then you're going to have one tire loaded, one not. If you really need additional weight, put wheel weights on. There's weights that you can bolt in place right there on the hub, and it's just big pieces of steel basically. Then you don't have to worry about when your tire leaks some air or whatever that it's going to leak that fluid out. That just seems like a needless headache to me. The other thing I did want to say is the dealer network is sparse. That is a big negative. That's one of the things where John Deere really has it on them, because there are John Deere dealers everywhere, and if I need help with something, I need a part, I'm going to be able to get it quickly and easily. Now, there are Mahindra dealers around, but they're fewer and farther between, and I don't think they just don't have the infrastructure in place, the inventory of parts and all that kind of stuff. If the capabilities and the price were the same, I would go with the John Deere. But if you're getting a better tractor for less money, then obviously I would choose a Mahindra. That's what I did. So there you go, guys. There's my tractor with the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, the price, the capability, how it's built. It's been a great machine. So I'm going to quit yakking now. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you want to support the channel, check me out on Patreon. Check out my merch store. We're going to get some new stuff over there pretty soon, I hope. Check me out on Instagram. I am putting additional content over there that you're not going to see on YouTube. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all that. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.